everybody, and welcome back to the Inky Thoughts podcast. Today, I have a very special guest on, as always. Today's guest, if you are a tattoo artist in the UK, you most certainly have heard of my guest today, I would imagine. But if you're not, you might still have heard of her. She's definitely built a robust following online from trying to innovate and spread more positivity in the industry and more focus on diversity and welcoming inclusivity in the industry as well as other really great innovations and building a stronger knowledge base as well regarding anything from hygiene to how you build your marketing and really how you build a shop that's safe without needing to necessarily put up great big signs about it, but just to have a comfortable atmosphere and welcoming people and being open to people of all sorts. But before I ramble on too much about her credentials, I will throw it to Kezz to introduce herself. Please, if you would.
Okay, so hello, first of all, it's nice to meet you. On the other end of Zoom, like I am so used to being the person who sends out the Zoom link, so this is very new. So I'm Kezz. I am a business mentor, but I'm also a tattoo studio owner and tattooer. So I've been tattooing, or my first job in tattooing was like 23 years ago. It was quite a long time ago now. And I have had my own studio for now 16 years in October. And one of the reasons I started Tattoo Smarter in the first place is because it is incredibly hard to tattoo, work on your craft, but also run a studio as well. Over the years, I've had quite a lot of breaks from tattooing, I would say, due to burnout, due to being undiagnosed autistic. I'm diagnosed now. But one thing I was hoping to do with the page was really kind of help other people who might have had similar troubles or might be having similar troubles now. So yeah, that was where the idea actually came from. And that is who I am and what I do.
So it very much came from practical experience with shortcomings you identified both when in the industry, working hard on your own tattoo career, but also in your breaks, as you call it, from the industry where you've been doing other stuff.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I am curious to know, because I always ask this question. It's very much the sociologist in me, and I can't help myself, to be honest. But I'm curious, what got you into tattoos and tattooing respectively?
So I have always been the outcast, the weirdo, like the kid that was bullied, the one that was picked on because they wore different clothes, they talked differently, they were interested in, stuff like tectonic plates or ghosts or whatever my new special interest was. I was always the little weird kid that spent time on their own drawing, in particular, a lot of drawing. And I liked more alternative things. So it wasn't just necessarily like alternative fashion, it was alternative music. And most of the people that I really looked up to, I guess, the people that I really thought I connected with, maybe like almost like my friends, but not really, because they're all musicians and stuff. But like, yeah, my peers, they all had tattoos, all of them. They were, they were all covered in tattoos. So it kind of felt like that was the uniform that you wore to fit into your tribe. So I guess, it was finding my tribe. So I was just fascinated by the fact that, there were adults out there who I really respected, who were doing really cool things, who looked completely different. And I was like, well, I already feel completely different. So it just felt like kind of the next step to that.
That's quite interesting. It reminds me a bit of when I had Doctor, I think Tom Crawford, who talks about the same thing, that like there was always in there. The tattoo sort of just brought it out to the surface. Like the appearance started to fit with who you saw yourself as on the inside, which also is very, very reminiscent of what a friend of mine and a professor of sociology in Wolverhampton, I think, I'm not sure I remember the place right, but in the UK, said about the quest for authenticity and how tattoos help with that. Like it helps you better embody what you see as your authentic self.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really like a much more eloquent way of describing things than how I had.
It is rare that I get called eloquent, so I will absolutely take that compliment, Kezz.
Yeah, yeah, I was just a weird kid, and it was just the next step, like the people didn't fit, and I felt like I didn't fit, and I loved drawing. Like I was always on my own drawing, at every opportunity. So yeah, it just felt, you know, well, actually, no, that's actually just jogged my memory. I'm going to tell you a story about how weird I was as a kid. So, in primary school, I remember I used to spend, obviously, again, time on my own. And I used to sit in the playground and I used to get little sharp rocks, like tiny little rocks that I'd found in the playground. And I used to sit on the grass and I used to like carve very lightly, like shapes and patterns onto my leg. Like so that's something that I used to do. That was like, must have been 7, 8.
So your tattoo career started in childhood as with Neolithic methods, basically.
Pretty much. But yeah, I just love that you could mark the skin in that way. Oh God, that's really just it's just popped out in memory that.
That's fantastic. I mean,
I did also used to draw on my mum's walls when I was young. A lot. Get into trouble for that. When I had the diagnosis, obviously as I was older, things started to make so much more sense.
You sort of start to fit the pieces you've been given into the right places in the puzzle. So
yeah.
But I mean, it seems like, at least for your case, like a very natural progression from what already sort of interested you and about what you already identified about yourself into both your own interest in decorating your body and embodying certain things with tattoos, but also in saying, I kind of want to do this as a career,
I mean, it just made sense. I remember I used to, when I used to travel on the bus because I'm from the coast, so I used to get on the bus, go into town, the center of town, and I was obsessed with there was this one tattoo studio that was on the coast road, which not coincidentally, it's on purpose where my shop is. I used to pass there all the time, and that was the landmark that I used to look out for. So I used to sit on that side of like the right side of the bus so I could see it and just look. Like I was absolutely fascinated with the tattoo studio, and I got my first tattoo there because I'd watched it like from being quite small. I'd watched the studio, and then I went in and got one. I mean, I was a bit too young, but it was that at that moment. And
you and half the artists out there.
But also, it was a woman that did my first tattoo, and I honestly think that was such a moment because everybody who else had seen it was all male tattooers. Everything I'd seen was male tattooers. And I was expecting a guy when I went in, and it was a woman. And I think that point actually changed my life because I was just like, fuck yes. Like I see.
Like your mind was open.
Yeah, because I see someone like me tattooing. So like, that it was a lady called Mandy. And yeah, I accidentally changed my life. They don't know that, but they definitely did.
Well, if they ever happen upon this, they'll know. But that's awesome to hear. Weirdly enough, my first tattoo was also by a woman. Not the most pleasant experience, but it did also, in that time, as an 18-year-old man, sort of open my mind to, hey, wait, even though you'd seen it in magazines now and then, you almost didn't notice it because the men were given much more space back in the early 00s as
that
well.
Still happens. It's not just then.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it still happens, even worse back then, but still happens.
Yeah.
But, so seeing a woman in person and getting a tattoo by her, it still sort of made you think, oh yeah, why wouldn't that be? I mean, I always had this weird analytical dive deeper into cultural stuff and all that mind. So I immediately thought, yeah, why wouldn't that be why wouldn't a woman be able to tattoo? Like, there's nothing about it that
no.
But that's a constant pet peeve of mine. I mean, I'm loving seeing more and more women getting into the industry all the time, and they do incredible work. But also, personally speaking, which you're a great example of, women in the industry have always, even when you look back at it in history books, like the ones by Matt Lotter and others, women seem to often, at least since the 50s, be the people that try to really innovate on the safety and the comfort and the uh, client interactions, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the social aspects and the safety aspects have been innovated by women
I
quite a
think,
bit.
yeah, I mean, I think it's because you can't pick apart tattooing from being a woman. So realistically, like we have a lot of struggles in regular life that are
Mm.
mirrored in tattooing. So, you know, it's just kind of amplified some of the problems that women experience every day. So I don't think you can tattoo necessarily. Well, certainly if you have a brain like mine, I don't think you can tattoo and not try and push the boundaries in some way and try and make it better. Like I don't think there's a way that you can. Like even if it's inadvertently, you don't realize you're doing it. For instance, making sure your clients are safe in terms of um not being harassed by the guys, because I mean it does happen, like
Yeah.
we know it happens. So yeah, like it doesn't necessarily have to be like a radical act. Women are
Oh no,
changing
no.
tattooing um just from their experiences in life and the skills that they have. They just have brought them to tattooing. So um yeah. Yeah, you can't unpick them, I don't think.
No, I think you're very right because I mean I think we don't notice it because it's already geared towards, like in a patriarchal social system, it's already geared towards male experience. So being a woman already going against anybody not cis male, to be honest, will push back on that even just by claiming space and existing and working in that space in this case. So yeah, I completely agree. You can't divorce that from the profession because being in that space and embodying their profession as a tattoo artist, especially, you can't separate their embodied identity from the work they do and how they interact with their clients as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Um yeah, because I mean I think like to the conversations that I have pretty much daily with my tattoo smarter clients and the people who follow online and stuff, we've all had very similar experiences. A lot of AFAB and non-binary people, or anybody who kind of sits, as a minority in some way.
Yeah.
So we've all had very similar experiences. For instance, I opened my tattoo studio and I was not ready. Like it was far too early in my career. I didn't know enough about my craft. I didn't know enough about myself. I had a lot of work to do. But there wasn't anywhere safe for me. So it was kind of like my only option. The studios that I'd worked in before I opened my space, there was sexual harassment. There was real problems with ethics. There was problems with hygiene. I was taken advantage of. And, I'm not a special case. That happened a lot and is still happening now. There are a lot of studio owners or people who are tattooing, and it isn't necessarily about the art for them or about the connection with their clients. It's actually, how do we prey on vulnerable people? How do I have that power? What can I get away with? And it's still happening. And yeah, like, I do post about it quite frequently because I know how horrible it feels. And I was slightly older when I started tattooing, so I was at university. But I know there's very young 17, 18-year-olds starting, and they can be incredibly naive, and it's not their fault. It's just they'll do whatever they can to tattoo, and people know that, and people prey on that.
I mean, there's the thing is, especially years ago, and still to this day, there's not really anybody coming out with a pamphlet going, "Here's how you safely get into the industry." So there's, I mean, from how I see it as a sociologist looking in from the outside of a tattoo collector, there's an incredible need for people like yourself and others in the space that are starting to go out and say, "Hey, you don't have to take this shit. You don't have to go and be so desperate that you let people prey upon you in this vulnerable moment because you want to do this career. You can achieve it but you can also find a safe space and a safe mentor
Yeah.
to do it with.
It is just sometimes really quite hard to find those spaces because
Yeah,
there are
absolutely.
people that use buzzwords like safe space and they say they're inclusive, and actually it's performative because it's fashionable to say those things. They don't actually practice what they preach at all. For instance, you've even now got studios that'll say, all bodies welcome, which is a brilliant message, like we should be thinking in this way. But then the tattoo studios are upstairs. They don't have lifts. They don't have, any access for anybody who, say, was a wheelchair user or, needed a disability aid in some way. So they say it's for all bodies, but it's bollocks. Like they haven't even put the thought into it, and yeah. The genuinely safe spaces are difficult to find, and it is for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, you know this because you're a sociologist. This is literally what you do. But you think there's no employment laws. There's no kind of actual proper regulations. In the UK, we've got different local authorities that have different rules. So that on a level is shit. Because
absolutely.
it's shit as a studio owner, but that there's no employment law. So everyone's self-employed, but it means there's no protection for a studio owner. So someone can come, be an apprentice, and then just fuck off. They'll do like 8 months with you, and you'll spend, all of that time and energy and money and stuff trying to get them up to speed. They've come into the industry, they've just taken and fucked off like that. There's no protection for studio owners, but then in the same breath, there's no protection for young tattooers who are self-employed either. So they can be taken advantage of in terms of, like if you wanted an apprenticeship, you work for free. Absolutely. You've got tattoo shops that will say you can't do guest spots, you can't charge, you can't charge particular prices, you can't go and work somewhere else. That is actually hidden employment. It's against the law. Like, you should be able to charge your own prices, you should be able to work somewhere else, you should be able to set your own hours and stuff. And because there's none of those regulations, everybody gets fucked over in those situations. And it's why there's so much conflict in tattooing. Because obviously autistic, I love rules, but not all rules. If it don't make sense, I'm not doing it. If it's gonna I don't know, I am the person that's like, let's sit down and read the rules of the game first so that we can all have fun without fighting. Like, that is how I feel. And
I can support that. If we all know how it plays, we can agree on how to do it.
Yeah. So in tattooing, the lack of regulation means we also attract people who don't like rules, people who couldn't necessarily do a 9 to 5. Not that that's the be all and end all, because it isn't. I definitely couldn't do it.
No.
But it means people, that can be really quite difficult to deal with in tattooing, and you get a lot of clashing of personalities. Then we have stuff like, in the UK, you don't even need a DBS check to work with the public.
Jesus, that is...
Everybody in my studio is DBS checked because I make sure, even the guests that come...
for non-UK people, could you explain DBS real quick?
Okay, so DBS checked is basically a police check to make sure that there's no criminal record. Now, you've got a basic one, and then if it flags something up, you can do an advanced one. I am all for people who have criminal records getting jobs. Yeah. So, for instance, if a DBS check came back and it, there was something on there, I wouldn't discriminate against somebody, working at the studio. Entirely dependent, well, not the discrimination part, like I don't discriminate, but if that person, say, had a really serious charge to do with, sexual assault or whatever, there is not a chance in hell that I would have them in the space.
No, I get that.
So I actually think it's really important to have, and it shows a level of respect for your clients. You're saying we do care about you, because we...
being serious as an industry like that also, as you were alluding to, removes the possibility that some people just go into it to hide because they can't get because they fucked up so much
Yep.
within society that they basically one step away from possibly a prison sentence, and then they go and hide away almost in the tattoo industry at times. And I know it's relatively rare, but it does happen. Like it
You
absolutely does
see,
happen.
so I don't think it's as rare as you think. So,
Could possibly not be.
I think there's a lot of people in tattooing who are not safe that shouldn't be
Yeah.
tattooing. And I do think part
Oh,
of the reason,
absolutely agree there.
yeah, I think part of the reason that they're tattooing isn't to do with the art, isn't to do
No.
with the connection you have with your client, it isn't to do with maybe advancing the industry. It is because they can prey on people. Like,
Aye.
and I feel
Absolutely.
that because I honestly, I talk to so many people every day, and it's the same stories, it's the same type of people.
Mm.
You know, I put a post up not that long ago about grooming, and
Yeah.
you know, the majority of the sexual stuff, the sexual grooming, you know, it is guys, but grooming
Yeah.
also come, you know, there's women in the industry doing it as well. You know, they are preying on the fact that people just want to tattoo. So yeah,
Yeah.
where we were basically trying to say like there's lots of different reasons. There's lots of different things, there's lots of different layers. Um and if we could just put some things in place, you know, like even just
Yeah.
basic standards for hygiene, you know, there is meant to be basic hygiene standards, and it's different from local authority, and it's different from country to country. However, there still doesn't seem to be any universal standards
Nope.
realistically. If you know, people say there are and they know what they're doing, but then you see them on a reel and you know, they're resting their arms, you know, on people's backs that are covered in blood, or they've got a watch on, or hair dangling in the tattoo.
Yep.
They're,
Or they check their phone while they're
oh my
tattooing.
God. I mean, that has happened to me. So,
That is,
do you want
I've
to
been very. I will say this. I've luckily been very lucky myself. Every single tattoo I've been with have been like, oh, gloves up, check phone, new gloves on. Like
Yeah, yeah.
how it should be, you know.
The bare minimum. Let's at least get
Yeah.
that right. So, do you want another story, another anecdote, or is this too much? Because I've literally got.
No, no. I'm here to facilitate your point.
So I was a relatively young tattooer, like in terms of experience. So I was maybe like between 8 and 10 years, maybe. And there was a tattooer that I absolutely idolized. Um, he'd been tattooing for a lot longer, so he was on about, I'd say about 35 years. Sorry, I've got the
Yeah.
hiccups. Um, and I loved his work, and it was at London Convention. It was when it was at the Tobacco Dock. It was that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
great convention. And yeah, I was getting tattooed, and it was the most painful experience of my life. And I should have known in that moment that something wasn't quite right. But then his pal came over, and he just had twins or something, so he was excited. And he stopped tattooing me with his, you know, he still had his bloody gloves on, went and grabbed this guy's phone, was scrolling through, looking at pictures of these fucking babies.
No.
And I was sat there freaking out, but inwardly freaking out because I was like, I feel like this guy's got more power and I can't say anything. Like I'm actually frightened to say anything because
Well, that's the thing. A lot of people don't consider that you've talked about a lot. The power dynamic
yeah,
in the situation, because a lot of artists I get can feel with how it's a service industry as well that they lose some power in the planning process. But the thing is, in the tattooing moment, the power dynamic unequivocally, in most cases, in 99% of cases, shifts to the tattoo artist. Like
yeah,
it is they're holding all the power, and most people, especially newer people to being tattooed or be working in the industry, don't even feel they have the confidence to speak out when they see something, even if they see something that they think is clearly wrong.
yeah. And I mean, because clients experience that because it's a very intimate, very vulnerable moment. And I don't think enough tattooers actually respect that. You know, I think there's some
No.
real consent issues as well. The bare minimum you can do for your client is have hygiene standards that are
Yep.
good. And I mean good. It's not just, oh yeah, you know, I change gloves every now and again or whatever.
Or clean
Like,
the floor once a
yeah,
week, or
yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly that. And then, you know, from the aspect of being a tattooer, getting tattooed, he still had power because he'd been tattooing a lot longer. He was way more respected than I was as a tattooer, if you look at the bigger picture, and that was a great convention. And you don't want tattooers to then, tell organizers,
Well, around the
this
whole,
isn't a
yeah.
problem, like it was very much keep your mouth shut because you don't want to spoil your chances of getting into conventions, from getting into the magazines and stuff like that. Because magazines back in the day were like a really
Oh
big
yeah,
deal.
absolutely.
So you had to be quite considered. But obviously, inwardly, I was kind of like, what the fuck?
Shit.
The phones are like dirtier than toilets. Like, and
They're
like,
dirtier than coins.
yeah, so just the lack of care for my safety. I just
That
thought, and
is,
the
yeah.
lack of respect for tattooing as well. Like a lot of these guys talk a big game about giving back to the industry, and
Yeah.
nobody else deserves it as much as them. And if you cannot do those basics, I think actually you're not giving back to
No, I
tattooing.
agree. I agree.
So yeah,
But it's a weird thing where they idolize this biker period in tattooing. But the weird thing is that's a very short period in tattooing, and even some of the people they sometimes credit with starting that period, which they didn't. They were appropriated by the biker culture. They hated one, the biker image that it was getting, and two, they hated how people started to neglect some of the safety and hygiene stuff and that, and didn't focus on developing that. And we're talking big names from fucking Phil Sparrow to Ed Hardy and all these people. They all would hate to see modern tattooers neglect or push back against innovating in these areas and making it better for everybody. Like,
uh, so
absolutely.
I even feel like, in terms of hygiene, we've taken a real step back from standards. I
Uh,
feel like standards are getting worse, not better.
mm,
And I don't know whether or not it's people who are teaching other people. Well, certainly my mentors were clueless when it came to hygiene.
yeah.
As
Yeah.
a young tattooer, I went into studios and I was like, right, well, this is fucking wrong. We've got to change this, and that's one of the other reasons I didn't really fit very well at the studios at the start, because I was just like,
This
seeing,
can't be right.
yeah, like, I remember one mentor that I had used to bollock me for taking too long to set up, strip the
Yeah.
strip, and set up
It's
my.
not a fucking race.
It is when you're trying to earn as much money as possible
Yeah, yeah,
throughout the
yeah,
day, and that's what he was. That's that only thing he cared
yeah.
about. My um hygiene standards took too long. Like I was losing him money.
Shite.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I look back to him, and, still now he hasn't got standards. So, like, it was off my own back. I went and learned,
Mm,
as much as
mm,
I could. And, those guys that I worked for, they're still teaching or not teaching really bad practice. So then,
yeah.
the next level of tattooers down, the next generation, they haven't had the right teachings either. And then when they teach other people, they haven't
It's
had the right teaching. And
it's nuts.
you see reels and TikToks every day. Like did you see the guy with the fucking cat? The cat,
Yep.
like, what? You don't use
Whew.
an actual cat's paw to put a like for a tattoo
That's just
stencil?
not. No, no. You can do that on a paper.
Yeah,
Clear it up. Make the stencil. That's absolutely with the technology that's ready and available. There's no need to put it on the person. You can get it down to the fucking hairs on that paw
yeah.
on the fucking stencil paper without it ever touching the area you're tattooing. It's just nuts to me.
So, I mean, some people do it for clout. They do it for outrage because
Yeah.
rage bait obviously works on the internet.
Same with the girlfriend bite mark, girlfriend boyfriend bite thing.
No,
Fine, sometimes would they at least cover the area in plastic when they do it, but the thing is, you can do it. There's other ways to do this shit.
there's tons of ways to do
Fuck,
it.
man.
And yeah, so like for me, that clear lack of respect for a client,
Yeah.
we would not have a job if it wasn't
Mm.
for clients. Tattoos are a collaboration. It has never
Mm.
been just about the artwork.
Nope,
And
couldn't agree more.
so many tattooers, it's all you hear, you need to draw more, just it should only be about the work. And I'm just like this, no, that's wrong. It should be about that collaboration with the client. So you have to have the
Mm.
basics right.
Absolutely.
And I think it's been so disrespectful for tattooing and the life that they've been provided with. They're not giving back
Yeah.
when they don't know hygiene or they don't care,
Yeah.
you know.
Agreed. There's this new wave, I think, sometimes. I don't think it's the majority, but this is not a too big minority that it can't be ignored. That's like glorifying tattooing in the 90s now by making these joke reels and all this stuff. It's like, but the thing is, that was fucking unsafe.
Yeah,
It was not smart. It's not something to glorify. I get that you want to be tough guys, you want to make it cool, or you want to not have people sit there with teddies and all that. Cool. As I talked with Paula Castle about, make a fucking hardcore studio then where you say it with your chest and then you get those types of clients, and that's fine. But you still owe it even to the tough guys and the biker fuckers to have good hygiene so nobody gets fucking sick.
yeah. I mean, like,
I mean, that's just across the board. Smart thing to do. Glorifying that, oh, we used to pour whiskey on the tattoos and shit like that. No, not even in the 90s they did that. You're fucked in the head.
yeah. So, like, a lot of the nostalgia, though, I think back to the 90s, and I just think, oh my god, the 90s was a fucking incredible time, just in general. So I feel
Yeah.
like life wasn't as hard, you know. And I think sometimes people do get mixed up with those feelings that they had back then, you know.
Hmm.
And, you know, you've got to think as well, competitively, there wasn't as many studios, so you could
No,
treat
true.
your clients like shit and they'd still come
Yeah.
back because there wasn't much choice, you know. So I think there's a nostalgia definitely attached to those feelings and not necessarily the process, but they
Yeah.
can't unpick that themselves. Like, they don't quite understand. It's like,
There's a lack of critical reading when
yeah,
people think back to those
yeah.
times.
It's like the old people who will say, like, in my day, we used to walk in the snow and we had ice on the inside of the windows and everyone just got on with it and it was a wonderful time. And I'm just thinking to myself, it was a wonderful time because
Bollocks.
you were a child and your parents
Yes, exactly.
had all of the responsibility and all of the stress about money that you never even contemplated. I feel
Absolutely.
like it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Especially having quite a bit of knowledge about identity work and stuff like that, and the thing is, a lot of people forget to critically read when they think back to these times in their lives and that, and think about, well, what was also shit. And when you actually start to think about these details and instead pick out the moments that were really cool, you also start to notice, oh shit, this was not so fun. This didn't work. This was not good. This was horrible. Like, there's lots. It's in a lot of industries in the 90s, not just tattooing. There was absolutely fucking horrendous. Yet people don't read it critically, so they just think back to, well, we didn't have the economic crisis of 2008 yet. We seem to all have more money. We seem to have better welfare. Yeah, true. Those things were true. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean it was all just fucking peachy.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the crash because I opened my studio the year after. And everybody was real panicked, except for me because I was just like, "This is fine." Like, you know,
Well, I was only 18, so I was also just like,
yeah. I mean, I can't remember how old was I in 2000. Oh God, I don't know. I'm 42 now, anyway. So,
let's stop.
but I just remember thinking at the time, let's not panic. You know, it will be okay. But I honestly think part of that was down to being neurodivergent. I mean, I was undiagnosed at that point, and I think sometimes I just get an idea and I'm just like, literally nothing can stop me from doing this thing. Like, I literally would walk over broken glass to make it happen. And I was actually talking to somebody this morning about this. I feel like if I'd been diagnosed sooner, yes, I may have had maybe more support and I probably wouldn't as burnt out as much as I have done in the past. I wouldn't have had the mental health struggles that I had when I was younger. But I also think I might not have done some of the things that I've done because I just jumped in full feet. And I feel like maybe if I'd had the diagnoses, I might have been a bit frightened or, you know, thought, yeah, I couldn't do this. So, like, I just did it. without.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I don't want to go down the complete rabbit hole of sociology of talking about the relevancy of diagnoses and how it can be a double-edged sword. But there is something to that, that it can absolutely, it has to be something that the person can use to make sense of what they're going through, which is why it's not always helpful for everybody to get diagnosed, but it is helpful for the ones that really need it. And that's my very short spiel on that one, because that could be a whole thing on its own,
Yeah,
not all to do
four
with
more podcasts,
to do.
isn't it? Really.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is very relevant to this. And I think, I mean, like, the reason I wanted you on is especially because you're doing this, you're being very vocal and very reflective and very analytical about these things. So that's what you're putting into a lot of what you do with Tattoo Smarter, where you're helping people both make sense of, well, how do you go about this, but also how do you go about this the right way? How can you make sense of this without panicking or selling your soul to do it, but instead building something that holds up and has a great foundation. There's a lot of good stuff in it, but also on a greater level, which we've already spoken about, you also push a lot for, let's take this industry seriously, so it can also be taken serious legislatively. Like, so there could be regulations that can help everybody, so it can be more of a coherent and cohesive voice about hygiene, standards about these things, and how you run the business, how apprenticeships work. All this stuff could absolutely be better, but it happens best when people can agree on some sort of standards and talk about it and have some coherence.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that don't want standards, and it's because
Yeah.
they benefit from not having them.
Yep.
Um, but I think it would be great for tattooing in general if we just had some coherence, like just on the real basics, like, in terms of, like, say, apprenticeships. What I've found is not every mentor is a natural teacher, and that isn't
Not at
necessarily
all.
their skill. Their skill is tattooing. So you find that there are some incredible tattooers, and they, will teach, say, just do good tattoos. If you do good tattoos, you will have clients. And they they're not thinking critically maybe about their own their standard. Like, they might not realize actually they're an outlier in terms of their skill. Like,
Yeah.
not everybody is going to be the best tattooer ever. Like, it's obviously good to have that kind of goal and that aim, but people's skill and standards will vary dramatically over the industry, because that's just life. There are people right at the top, and there's people who are really stand out. Them telling someone who will never be as good at tattooing as them ever, just be good at tattoos, do tattoos just like mine, you'll be busy.
Yeah.
They can't actually do that. Like, they're never going to be able to
No.
be as good as them. So, they're kind of a little bit blind to that, because they're busy, because they're so good. They're
Yeah.
the ones in terms of marketing that don't even have to try that hard. And they're not necessarily doing their apprentices any good
No.
necessarily. Well, they are, because they're teaching them amazing stuff
Yeah,
about
of
the
course, of course, of
actual
course.
technical skill of tattooing, but they're not necessarily teaching the essential business skills that they need. They're just lacking, I think, over every pretty much apprenticeship I've seen. It's the business side is kind of like, be nice to your clients, treat them like your best friends, draw all the time, don't sleep. The best tattooer you can be, which is obviously really
Yeah.
good. Being the best tattooer you can be is obviously really good
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
promising them clients, nah, you're doing them a disservice. You know,
Aye.
I think giving apprentices and young tattooers and juniors and stuff. I mean, I also work with lots of really experienced tattooers who
Yeah.
maybe been tattooing the same amount of time as I have, or their studio owners, and they didn't know, they weren't taught this stuff off their mentors either. Or, we've been tattooing so long, this stuff didn't even fucking exist. Like, I've tried so hard to stay current, even though I've been in the industry for a long time. So, practical skills like teaching people how to build a mailing list, how to build a digital booking system, how to market themselves,
Yeah.
helping them understand why social media presence is important. And the answer is,
Yeah.
even with recommendations and word of mouth, which obviously are brilliant, like you want those, but everybody
Yeah.
now does digital research. So you get a recommendation, the first, it used to be you might go down to the tattoo shop and pop in,
Yeah.
but nobody does that now. You get a recommendation. The first thing people do is jump online and do digital research first. So
Yep.
they need to understand and have lots of different information before they even think about inquiring. So the consultation process happens online when people aren't even present. Like it's very
Yeah.
different now. But mentors aren't teaching their apprentices these things because they A, might not know it themselves, or B, they're too scared to make changes. Ooh, a mailing list. No, 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 I'm not doing that. We've never done that.
There's a lot of that. Like, there's a lot of just reproducing what they know work instead of experimenting with what could work better.
Yeah.
Quite often.
I think that goes back to the cult aspect that we spoke about
Yeah.
before the
Honest.
camera was on. It is really hard to put yourself out there and do something different in an industry
Yeah.
that is so fucking judgmental. And we're like pack animals. You see a disagreement online and people just barge in, let's cancel this person, and people are just real nasty to each other online. If you're not really, really secure in yourself, if you've had some difficulties over your life, that's a horrible thing to have to go through. So nobody really wants to be called worse than shit online. Like, who wants to put themselves out there? Who wants to be judged?
I mean, completely agree. And that there is a lot of that. I mean, it's a different kind of gatekeeping that people don't often think about, but there's that whole thing of like trying to keep people from changing stuff because there's a whole, I mean, some sociologists back in the day used to call it anomie, that people have a fear of when things change, they're left behind. And it's difficult for them to articulate even towards themselves sometimes. So instead they lash out towards people
Yeah.
that are creating this change.
Yeah, I mean that is exactly it. Yeah, like I see it time and time again. Tattooers come to me and they're like, right, my bookings have slowed down. Like, how do I make it better? Like, what are the things I need to do? Or I can't get engagement online. What do I do? And we lay out steps and we have chats about it or whatever. And then they'll go back and their mentor or people they work with will be like, oh no, you shouldn't do that.
Fuck that.
Yeah, like, and then they do so well for themselves because obviously they've decided, actually, I'm going to make a change. I can't keep doing the same thing over and over again because that is just not going to work. There's like a bit of a aha moment, and they're like, right, okay, yeah, I know that I need to do something. There's this person saying, look, they can help, so I'm going to do it. And it is. We've got such a weird dynamic as well because we have things like tattoo schools and stuff like that maybe aren't that legitimate. And tattooers don't seem to be able to pick apart like who the grifters are, where the scamming is, and they just think all
again, standardization and regulation would help now.
Yeah, exactly that. So they just think all change bad, anyone trying to do better and help bad, scam, grifter. I had one guy on Threads, named him personally. This is a guy that I've never ever met. He just went online and like somebody had put a post up just saying, what's one tattooer you hate? And he just named me like that. And I was like, dude, like, I've not even met you. Like, you've got some real problems.
Yes, fuck. Yeah, that is Jesus.
But that happens a lot, not just to me, just anybody who's trying to make positive change. Anyone who is doing something different.
But I think you hit the nail on the head with the whole thing, not caring to discern who's actually trying to make a grift and who's maybe spotting something that could work. Because even looking out from the outside in as a sociologist, the concept of a tattoo school doesn't bother me. The way it's executed often is what bothers me. Because you can't learn to tattoo in a 4-week, 2-month fucking
No,
course.
no,
Nobody fucking can.
no.
It doesn't teach you on the other skills outside of the practical either. You can't even finish the practical stuff in that short time. But let's imagine, play with the thought. Let's imagine it became like it is to become a plumber here in Denmark, and you spent 3 years in school. You learn practical stuff, you learn technical stuff, you learn bookkeeping, business stuff, all that shit, and then you go out into an apprenticeship for short, perhaps for like 6 months, maybe a year, and then you are done.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, if
something like that would be fine,
yeah,
because you
I
get a
mean,
school period, you get practical
yeah,
experience, and then you're done.
yeah,
But they don't do that, and I get that that's the problem. But that
yeah,
doesn't mean that the concept's bad.
yeah. So essentially, like there is a lot of merit in learning properly and having
Yeah,
really structured
yeah,
learning.
absolutely.
You know, especially since a lot of like tattooers are neurodivergent as well. So we've got memory problems, you know, we've got demand avoidance. There's
Yeah.
lots of stuff there. Something structured is actually a fucking brilliant idea
Yep.
for lots of reasons.
I also love that lots of people watching this, if there will be lots of people, are going to be like, I'm not.
Let's
Yeah,
go to
mostly
school.
you are.
Fuck
A
it.
lot of you don't know it, but you definitely are.
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen a heavier populated by neurodivergent
Oh yeah,
people
absolutely.
group than the tattoo industry. Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, well, but it makes perfect sense because we don't
Yeah.
necessarily fit. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Fully.
when I was younger was definitely very alternative. Now it
Mm.
seems a lot more accessible to different kinds of people. So it is slightly different, but it's definitely where all the neurodivergent people hang out. I'm certain.
Yeah, and I
And
mean, that's just, it's
creative.
sort of just mirroring what happened early on in history. I mean, think about it. Some of the greats were fucking professors before they became tattoo artists. Like Phil Sparrow, he was an English professor.
Yeah.
Then got fired from that, then became one of the big greats that birthed modern tattooing.
I mean, I think it's just because neurodivergent people think differently, you know, like,
I think
you
you're very
know,
correct.
and it's not
Yeah.
intentional. It's really not intentional. It can cause a lot of problems. Yeah, if we go back to tattoo schools,
Yeah.
it's because people have adopted that idea in an attempt, obviously, to get as much money off people
Yeah.
as possible.
Absolutely.
And that, I mean, that's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem. It's the intention. You know, they don't
Yeah.
care about making good tattooers. They're literally
I
just.
mean, I couldn't agree more, because they spotted a real problem that a lot of people
Yeah,
get
yeah,
taken advantage of in apprenticeships now and then and get scammed.
yeah,
And then they said, yeah, we're going to solve it by scamming them.
yeah. So, like,
Basically.
there is no difference between a tattoo school and
Yeah.
a shit apprenticeship. Like,
Yeah.
they're the same, you know, except one is like charging up front and the
Yeah.
other is possibly, you know, psychologically damaging the
Mhm.
the person. Or you know, I mean, I still see apprenticeships offered where the people are paid, but again, that's so nuanced, because as a studio owner, I know how it feels when you take time to teach somebody and then they don't repay you by, you know, allocating a respectful amount of time to your business. So, you know, I see it from both sides. Like, there's, you know,
No, I get that.
it's so, yeah, it is so nuanced, because you don't want studio owners who are often demonized, villainized, when actually loads of them are sound.
No.
You know, it's shit to see them taken advantage of, you know, when the people come into their businesses, take what they want and then fuck off. Like, that's terrible. And I can understand why those people would want to charge up front, you know, as long as the standards that they were upholding were good, you know, they were teaching correct hygiene, you know, teaching good technique. But often that isn't the case either. I mean, so, it's just a mess, really. That's all I've got.
In an ideal world, for me, speaking as, I mean, I'm not a tattoo artist, I'm just looking from the outside and then comparing different industries, you could say. But in an ideal world, it would work like being coming a builder of any sort of the English terms elude me sometimes, but a contract of some sort, a skilled labor of some sort, where you, at least in Denmark and similar countries, when you enter an apprenticeship, the government pays part of your apprentice salary. You actually get salaried when you enter the practical portion where you go into an apprenticeship, like a physical apprenticeship. But the government also subsidizes that pay. So the actual company you're apprenticing at doesn't pay most of your salary, as far as I'm aware. which helps them, feel better about, they're done, they're going to another company, because they've been, they've not lost anything on the investment. Of course, there's still some you could talk about with the moral and the ethics of, like,
Yeah.
it is still a good showing a bit of good faith and good morals to say, okay, I'll stay here for a bit, and cut my teeth on working at this company that also apprentices that, but at least it alleviates some of that when you've at least not you can at least recuperate some of your financial expenditure and teaching people, because there's a lot of that. You'll help them out with all sorts of stuff, from inks to machines to everything, and a space to practice.
I mean, there are apprenticeship schemes like that actually in the UK. However, they're not fit for purpose. So, I think independently we've got terrible local authorities and terrible like main government as well. In Wales, they introduced more stricter rules where you have to sit an exam and stuff like that. But I have talked to a lot of Welsh tattooers, and so far they feel money grab, not really fit for purpose. And I don't feel like that was tattooer led, the legislation.
No.
I feel like it was somebody who doesn't know the industry at all has come in and decided some things. And
well, that sadly happens a lot, because the tattoo world is horrible at organizing, because half the people hate unions, the others hate the unions that are currently there. And whenever you can't unionize like that, sorry to say that, I know I'm a socialist and a Scandinavian, so this is of course coming from a biased position, I guess, but the thing is, the more unionized the tattoo world could be, the more power they would get to actually be heard by those that make legislation.
Absolutely.
The more they would be able to say, hey, you got to actually talk to us before you make legislation in our industry. It's not going to be perfect. It's not always going to work out. But the more one does that, the more one organizes, the more one keeps pushing on that, the more you will be heard.
Yeah. No,
that's just how it works.
I couldn't agree more. It's just actually really difficult to set up conversations with the right people.
Absolutely.
That it is unfortunate, but I think, going back to what we were saying about, tattoo schools, poor apprenticeships and stuff, everybody has different experiences. I see a real trend online of people saying, I will not employ you, or I will not take you on if you've been to a tattoo school. And the overall message of that is pretty good, because it's kind of like, hey, you can't tattoo if you've done these courses. Like, you can't just assume that you can do this job. Like, it's pretty arrogant, it's pretty ignorant, but it's also naive as well. So it's not necessarily coming from malice. Like, I have spoken to people who have done some of these ones, and they've been really ripped off. But at the core of that, they really, really want to tattoo.
Of course.
So I would never say I wouldn't take somebody who'd been to a tattoo school, because everyone's capable of being naive at points in their lives. I was very naive when I got my my apprenticeships, which I don't think is any different between like getting ripped off from a tattoo school or whatever. But, if someone came to me and was like, I've been to a tattoo school, I wouldn't automatically reject them because they'd been ripped off by somebody in our industry. It's our fault. It's not their fault. They could be incredibly talented. They could be an amazing.
They just haven't had the right nurturing,
the
right teaching.
You would just say to them, well, probably what you've learned is bollocks, so we're going to have to teach you again from the start.
We're going to start over.
Yeah, you've got to start over.
You want this, we're going to start over.
As long as they're humble, and I hate the term humble, actually. Like, we say it a lot in tattooing.
No, I get what you mean, but that's for lack of a better term.
As long as they understand, disregard that stuff, and let's start again. Because actually, you've looked at their portfolio, you've seen their attitude, and
Fully agree.
They've got loads of potential. They would actually be an asset to tattooing. So, I don't know why I went off on that, but I did definitely want to.
Again, I'm here to facilitate your point, and I fully get what you're saying. But the tattoo industry does need to think about these things. There's only good that you went off on that, because it is becoming more prevalent. There are more and more of these things popping up. I'm not going to name names or anything, but even I was like, God, to think, and even there, some people were handing out flyers for, hey, take our tattoo course, learn to tattoo in 2 months. That's a very prestigious tattoo convention, and even there, people are handing out these flyers. So it's becoming very prevalent. Yet there's this, what can you say? There's a giant disagreement still on the validity of these tattoo schools and whether you can really do it, how you would do it right, and all this stuff. Yet people keep pushing this towards anybody that just looks like they might want a tattoo. For example, I don't at all have any ambition to learn how to tattoo. Yet I got given several of these flyers.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
I mean, I'm not going to claim that all tattoo schools are bad, because I
no,
haven't
no, no,
seen all of them. I haven't
nor
seen
would I.
the syllabus. I haven't seen how it's structured. I don't know who
Hmm.
the teachers are.
No,
Um,
no, no.
But it takes a long time to learn.
Yep,
Like
yep.
sell. I think maybe one of the issues is selling it is like, you will be a qualified tattooer when you finish this course. You absolutely will not.
Nope.
So I feel like that's the mis-selling part.
Yep.
If it was like this is a basic course.
Here's a 2-year course.
Yeah, here's a real basic course. Like, I found, like, when you're teaching people,
Yeah.
you teach them, obviously, the basics. You teach them the hygiene, you know, um, and you teach them, obviously, the basics technique wise. And from that point, a lot of the time, what apprentices need is just needle time. Like, they just need to tattoo. That's like the magical part. They
Yep.
find their own way. And sometimes apprentices find that really
Daunting.
yeah, and they find it difficult because they don't understand. Like, that's the magical part. Like, you,
Yeah.
they need to understand. I mean, obviously, I learn on coils and stuff, so skin resistance very different with a coil than it is from a pen machine or whatever. But there are things that you just cannot be actually taught. You teach yourself it just from
Yes.
tattooing. So, like, understanding what it feels like, understanding what your machines feel like, all of that
Mm.
comes like with practice.
Yeah. Agreed.
So yeah, I mean, I just don't see how you can get that from a tattoo school, because
No, at least not from how short most of them claim to be
yeah,
able to. A shorter period of time, most of them
yeah.
claim to be able to teach you it. I mean,
you know,
that's quite baffling. The shortest period of time I've ever seen for one of them was a month, and that just seems like that should just be a red flag for anybody wanting to learn to tattoo. If anybody claims they can teach you that in a month.
yeah, I mean, you can learn the basics,
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
get
Sure.
some experience.
Yeah.
There is no, there's no, oh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Ooh,
There's
it's my
no,
second language, though.
yeah, so there's nothing can replace tattooing people, but you shouldn't really be
No.
practicing on people, you know,
No.
unless the consent is there. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm really new to tattooing. I've got no fucking clue what I'm doing. Can I have your skin? Some people are like, yep, sure. I want to be
Yep.
part of your journey. Some people are just like, I don't care about the quality. I just want something on. Like, you do have
Mm.
those people.
Aye.
But that come when you do a decent apprenticeship, like, people are very
Yep.
aware, like, this
Yep.
person's been tattooing this amount of time. But if someone comes just with a little certificate from their school, they think, actually, I'm qualified because that's what they've been told. They don't know any better. I'm ready.
Yep.
And then their clients potentially are just like, okay, because they don't know how it works either. So
Yep. Yeah.
yeah, and then that does damage to that tattooer as well, like the
Oh
amount of
yes.
trauma that they
That can do
go through.
lasting damage to the reputation as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the
So
career.
one of my first studios, again, it was the guy, the money guy, who was just like,
Aye.
tattoo everything. When I first
It's,
started at that studio, I must have only done about 10 tattoos. And
aye.
he took me because I was a woman and it would be good for business. And
Good start.
yeah, not because, oh God, not for the right reasons. Well,
No.
and I remember like this guy came in and he wanted his neck tattooed.
Yeah.
So like, a young tattooer done 10 tattoos, you don't give them a fucking neck tattoo to do. Like, what is that?
No.
But it was basically, yeah, you tattoo everything that comes in the door. And he wanted a PlayStation logo on his neck, and I'd never like, no, but
I mean, I'm a nerd,
yeah,
but on the neck.
and like, I don't know, I'd never done a neck, and if any of my younger tattooers who were at the studio, were they were going to be doing a neck, I'd be straight in there being like, right, okay, we need to have a conversation about this, like, because it's so different tattooing a neck. There's loads of plasma. The skin's a bit like ball skin. It's like actually really hard to tattoo necks. So like, but I didn't know that because I didn't have a warning. I was just told to tattoo that neck. So obviously, like, I'm tattooing it, and obviously it went wrong. It looked like shit. It was such a bad tattoo. And I totally fucked it up, and it's on his neck. So like, not only did my mentor not care about that fucking client, he also didn't care about me either. Because honestly, I still have nightmares about that now. There's sometimes
I can
I wake
imagine
up and
because
I'm like,
you have the feeling that
yeah,
I've fucked up this guy's
yeah,
skin, and not just that,
it's
but in a place he can't hide.
bad, like bad. And like, I saw him a couple of times, like in the street afterwards, and I was like, I'm
Shit.
annoyed. Like, fuck this. This is horrible.
How small can I make myself?
Yeah. But yeah, like, anyway, I don't know why we're talking about that, but that again,
No,
you can
it's
cause.
very relevant to what you're talking about because
I
I
hope
think
that
I mean
person.
I'll happily make it relevant right now because the thing is you're doing this, paying it forward based on a lot of experience you've had on both sides. You both had success stories, but you also had to rough it through some really rough things. And I think that's exactly what's made you so well equipped to do what you do with Tattoo Smarter. Because a lot of people will do this stuff and they've had only successes. But the thing is, that doesn't help you much then prepare people for when it fucks up.
Yeah, like,
Or for when you're in the rough, or for when you get a shitty master to apprentice under, or if you go into a toxic studio where people are horrible to you, or if you have clients that overstep, or anything like this. You've had these experiences,
yeah,
and you're willing to bear them and lay your heart out there to help people better be equipped for this. Because that's the other thing I really love about what you do. You never promise people this is not going to happen to me if you take my course.
no,
You do the thing that I love as a person that's taught sociology and a person that looks at this from outside as a sociologist. You instead prepare them for if this happens to you, now you are prepared.
yeah,
Because you can't promise people it won't happen.
no.
That's ludicrous.
It is. So like, I honestly think the best way to learn is to, like, well, not the best way. The way people learn is mostly fucking up. Like, and
Yeah.
all through tattooing and all through having my studio, it's just loads of fuck ups. Obviously, there's loads of mint bits as well. Like at the start of my career, like my studio and me, I was in loads of magazines. I was tattooing like in the States, Norway. I wrote a column for a magazine. So that bit at the start, I was like, well, this is going pretty good. And I was like, I was working loads of conventions as well. I was like, this is going really good. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm absolutely fucked. Like, I absolutely burnt out because it was full steam ahead. Yes to this convention, yes to this guest spot, yes to this magazine. But I think that, like, if it had continued on that, I mean, I'd probably not be here anymore, to be fair, because I was tired. But yeah, the fuck ups are the things that really stay with you, like really stay with you. I've had, times where, like, people have left my studio. I've had times where people have lied about me. I've had times where people have stolen. I've had times where I've fucked up a tax bill, and I even liquidated my business at one point. But because I've done that, like, I have those skills now to be like, hey, don't do the thing that I did. Let's do a bit. That, I've fucked up already. I mean, sometimes you
Aye,
just have to let people fuck up on their own. Like, it's a slow car
of
crash
course.
and you can see it happening. But I don't know. I think though, in those hard moments, um, yes, they're challenging, but you just learn so much from it.
Aye.
And yeah, like, I don't ever want to be one of those kind of mentors that's like, hey, have you just thought about changing your mindset, and whatever woo woo, like, but it doesn't
Yeah,
that,
I'm very happy you don't want to be that because
no,
that can drive me up the wall at times.
like, it's not tangible. You can't touch it. It doesn't
Yeah,
feel like, what is it? Like, I don't understand it. Like, I only respond to practical advice and
yeah,
actionable things. So, like, if someone comes to me and says, like, you know, I'm not doing very well on Instagram, and I'd
yeah.
be like, hey, have you got a mailing list? And they're like, what do you mean a mailing list? And I'm like, yeah, you've got the opportunity to sell directly to your clients, just circumnavigating Instagram altogether. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you literally tattoo people like all the time. You can ask them to go on your mailing list, and they're like,
Yep.
what?
Then they'll
And
get
I'm
a
like,
notification when you have some time. And
yeah.
yeah,
The people on your mailing list, they've already said they like you. They've already said yes to you. They're way more likely to buy from you again. They've shown interest. So why wouldn't you continue to email those people your flash designs? If you're not getting any traction on Instagram, let's
yep.
leave that for now. Let's use your mailing list. But I would never tell them, oh, do you know what? I can guarantee, your first million in 2 years,
Or
because
just manifest
you
them. Or
can't, like I can give you all the practical guidance,
yeah.
but I can't guarantee the outcome because everybody's different.
No, again, again, that's why I wanted to talk to you because I think that's the best way to teach people, to teach them actual implementable skills and tactics that they can then use. You can't guarantee a result, but you can absolutely guarantee them that it will help them structure it better, and that is something you can guarantee. And you do that, and you can tell from the reviews you get. People are absolutely loving what you do exactly because you give them something tangible they can implement
Yeah,
instead of a pseudo therapy session where you tell them to change their mindset around, which is not gonna. Sorry to say this, and I know I'm very negative on this sometimes. I'm an atheist after all, and a sociologist. It's just not gonna help a lot of people because then they just feel like they are the problem if they can't do that.
yeah, yeah. Because there's a lot of other things that go um into that. So there are some coaches that are incredibly successful, but
Mm.
it isn't just about what they're teaching. It's actually about their online
Nope.
persona. It's about what they look like. It's
Yep. Yep.
about
Yep. Yep. Yep.
you know they might be incredible marketers, but there
Mm-hmm.
might not be that much behind that because they've actually just learned that.
I could name a few.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know many, but you know, um, I just think the practical stuff is what I needed.
Yeah,
So that's why I try and give it back to people because
it was great.
I do think that's important. The other thing I was going to say, like, my worst nightmare, literally my worst nightmare, is people
Yeah.
doing my courses and not implementing the stuff. Now that's a control part on that's an autism thing.
Mm.
Like, I want to be like, look, if you just did those things, it would work. Like, I know that it would work, but I have to realize, like, not everybody's in the necessarily the right headspace to
Mm.
learn at that moment. They might be very busy in their lives. But the whole point of the courses is I want people to do them and do the work and see the outcome. Like, that's the thing that makes me really happy. Like, I love it when I get screenshots from people showing me their
Mm.
analytics and they're like, look how well this did. And I'm like, yeah, because I told you. But like, once they start to really like dig into it, um and that's what I want. Like, one of my, like, so talking about like people using the courses and stuff, one of my worst nightmare things happened recently. I got a negative review for one of my courses, and it's really rare. Well, I've had two. One of them was actually quite,
That's not a lot at all, but yeah.
yeah. But I mean, there'll be people out there who don't think their courses are good, and it's probably because they haven't done the work, and that's fine. That's up to them. But I asked for feedback like I don't ask for positive reviews, because I think on my courses I want people to say that bit didn't work, I didn't understand that bit, because then I can go back and make it better. Like that's what I always want. But recently I had somebody do my marketing course, and they asked, are you open to feedback? And I was like, of course I am. Like literally at the end of the course it says, I want feedback. It doesn't matter if it's negative. Like I want to hear whatever. Obviously, autism, I like honesty. I like, like I don't take criticism for me is helpful most of the time, unless someone's just being an arsehole, because then it's not proper criticism.
But that's not criticism. That's just being belligerent. Like.
Yeah. But the whole point of the marketing is there's the written course, because I want people to have things to refer back to, but also they're meant to come on a call with me, because there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of abstract concepts that really need to be talked through, so I know that they understand them, and we can come up with ideas and stuff together. But they didn't actually do the call, so they haven't really done the thing, but they don't like it, if that makes sense. So
no, it doesn't, but that's okay.
Yeah. So like I just really hope that they would book in a call so that we can go through it, and like, and I can get that valuable feedback as well. But obviously I can't force people to have a Zoom conversation with me like this. I cannot do it. But yeah, I want people to use the information, successfully. Like I never want to sell somebody a course and then them not use it. Like that is not why I've made them. Like the autism part of my brain is like, I have learned about this thing, I know about this thing, I can share this with you, because like mentoring for me is like a dream, because it's like info dump upon info dump. But people are asking me to do it. Like they're asking me, instead of me giving unsolicited advice where people are just like, what's she talking about? Like I never asked, because that causes conflict. It does. Like, people don't want to hear how they could do something better, like and it's hard if you know a better way. Like it's really difficult to keep my mouth shut. So like the Tattoo Smartest is mint, because I can just be like, hey, you're here because you want to know.
You asked for this.
There's 2 hours of me talking about your analytics on Facebook or like on Instagram or whatever. So yeah.
That's fantastic. Now, what a nice note to round it off. I've kept you for quite a while by now, so we're sort of nearing the end. But I always want to end we talked about some really deep stuff, and I think it's been absolutely brilliant. So I want to end on a slightly lighter note, hopefully. I imagine it'll be quite nice, this, actually. But I was wondering to ask you, what's been your favorite coaching moment so far?
Okay, so there is a few. So like, I have a client called Alan. Alan has left a review, so I'm not breaking any data or like privacy stuff.
No.
But I helped Alan with their marketing. Now, Alan's been tattooing for quite a long time. Is an introverted character, and I helped him with his marketing. Like it's over a year ago now. And we had some really good conversations, and obviously we implemented some practical stuff. And I talked about understanding why you post on Instagram, and like the importance of audience and stuff like that. So we had some really good chats about that, and he was like, oh well, I'd never be able to like really be on camera, I'd never do a talking head or whatever. Fast forward a year, and Alan's made a fucking book, and he's going on his Instagram and he's talking, it's an amazing, like he's a Japanese tattoo, just Japanese style tattoo. And he's talking through the book, like to camera, and just seeing the evolution of how he thought perhaps he couldn't do it, to taking those first steps and then building the confidence, and then send me some analytics, and then we'll talk through different bits that he's put up. Just seeing that evolution has been absolutely amazing. And I mean, I feel like that I gel with Alan because I feel like also probably a neurodivergent person, so very, very similar brain wise in terms of needing practical advice and logical and stuff. But yeah, just seeing Alan's evolution online has been remarkable.
I can imagine. I mean, I remember myself from teaching intro to sociology when I was attempting a PhD, my favorite moment was a student coming up and said they'd switched their major to sociology because of the seminars I've been teaching. And I don't even teach the course, I just do the practical seminars. I mean, so I absolutely get what you're talking about. It's amazing to see somebody improve, but also feel like they really got something from what you taught.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you can make a positive impact on somebody's life, that feels fucking great. It's
absolutely.
I think it is pretty selfish, realistically, if you think about it. Like, you're not doing it to be some kind of saint or some kind of, whatever. You're doing it because it does make you feel good when you've given somebody some guidance, they've used it and they've done really fucking well, and just seeing them, do well with it, that's been amazing. So I understand where you're coming from. Imagine someone changing what they're doing just because of that one, well, not in one moment, the series of moments that involve you. It's cool.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. That's a lovely story as well. Well, I guess I've kept you for well over an hour now. We're here at the end. And first of all, thank you so much for being on here. Like, it means the world to me to come on my Modest Still podcast here and nerd out about what you do in the tattoo industry. And I just want to say, you probably don't need this list of anybody that's been on here, but it's only fair. Would you please plug what you have going on?
Okay, so if anyone wants to do any courses, they're all in the bio on Instagram, so you click them, you can click through. But to be honest, it's always better for someone just to send me a DM and just say, these are my problems, and then I can recommend ways of fixing them, like which courses are best. I think I haven't launched this or anything yet, but I think I'm going to do like a more of a marketing mentorship. So I spend a little bit longer with people because there's a marketing course on there, and that involves one call. I would like to offer something a bit more hands-on, a little bit longer, so we can come up with more ideas together and really like critique different things and like say, this worked because of this, like bounce off each other. I'd like to do that. So at some point I'll launch that, but if anyone's interested in it, I can chat.
Absolutely. Let Kezz know. I mean,
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on here, Kezz. And to anybody listening in, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me.
Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode with the awesome Kezz Richardson. She has certainly got a lot of incredible projects out there trying to do her best to improve the tattoo industry and the community surrounding it with the knowledge to, teach and educate people in certain things that might help improve the way they work, from hygiene to how they market themselves, and even how we are more inclusive in the tattoo industry. Not we just said myself, but generally speaking here, by being more aware of how we create spaces where they're actually inclusive and open for everybody of all bodies, rather than just pretending or saying we are, because that brings in customers, so it's good for marketing. But enough about that. Hopefully you learned a lot from that episode. Next time we're going to dive into something rather nerdy as well, as always, but this time it's nerdy in a different way, where I'm going to be talking to the self-styled wizard and founder behind the Literary Ink convention over in the US, which is a convention that basically takes some of the stuff we know from book and comic book conventions and smashes it together with a tattoo convention filled to the brim with both artists and tattoo collectors who love the literary word, so to speak, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy or something else, and them all coming together to share both their love of tattoos and their love of literature. So it's going to be very exciting. Jennifer Edge is a wonderful person who's also been a fan of the podcast for quite a while. Herself has been very encouraging to me. So we had a lovely talk that I can't wait for you all to enjoy in a couple of weeks' time. So see you then.